Thank you. Premier, thank you. Oh, first we had dinner last night and had the best time. And thank you for letting me, a rank foreigner, ask you questions. I'm grateful for that. So I want to ask you about energy.
Yes.
And I want to spend all our time talking about energy because I mean, you're the Premier of Alberta.
Yes.
And I think it's really, really interesting. But I do feel duty-bound to ask you about something that people outside your country are paying attention to, and that's people who are imprisoned, unfortunately, in this province for what appear to be, again, I'm an outsider and I wouldn't presume to know all the details, but I'm interested in the topic and have looked into it. There are 4 working class men, I think there are others, but we'll just focus on the 4 who were arrested in Coutts near the Montana border for what appear to be political crimes and have not faced trial nor been given bail. That seems like a human rights violation at scale. It's shocking that could happen in a civilized country. Tell us what you know about that and what you think about it.
I should first say, because I know that there are representatives from mainstream media here, and they're going to ask me whether I agreed with every single word you said in the previous panel.
I hope they buzz off, I really do.
And so what I often say, especially when I'm being interviewed by the CBC, is, look, I don't agree with every word you say either, obviously, but I accept interviews and have conversations with everyone, because I think it's important for me to make sure that the world knows how incredible Alberta is. And it's my job to make sure that I can tell your audience that too. So just, I know CBC is here, so you can quote me on that one if you want. But to answer the question...
Thank you for those boos, well deserved.
I should mention Cian Bexty from Countersignals here as well, as is Derek Vilderbrand from Western Standard. I bet the Rebel guys are here too. And I talked to all of them as well. But what I would say is I had a bit of an education when I became Premier, because in our country, the criminal code is determined by the federal government. There's no interaction that you can have as a provincial leader on pardons, no interaction you can have with the police, no interaction you can have with prosecutors, no interaction you can have with the court system. I made my views very clear when I was running in the leadership that I call myself a libertarian conservative. When I was in a job very similar to yours, because I was in the media as well, I took the side of those who loved freedom and believed that we had severe government overreach. I think it's part of the reason why when the job came open, people voted for me. So I am not proud of our country for having frozen bank accounts. I'm not proud of our country for having jailed pastors. I'm not proud of our country for the fact that we still have people languishing in jail for going on 2 years, and the fact that the federal court just ruled that the federal government's actions in invoking the Emergency Act were illegal, and they chose to appeal rather than accept the judgment of the court. But it's a lawless government acting in a lawless way, and I have great sympathy for anyone who's been a victim of that.
Thank you for saying that. But given that the Trudeau government's actions as of yesterday have been ruled criminal, and you describe them as lawless, which I think demonstrably they are, and given that the media outlets, the big ones in Canada, are organs of the state, literally, we don't really know anything about what these 4 men, the Coutts 4, have been accused of doing. Don't you think it would send a powerful message to go visit them in jail and find out what they've been accused of?
Well, some of you may know I had a phone call with somebody in a similar position, and what I have learned is that all I can say is the Crown operates independently. Prosecutors have to make sure that they have a reasonable likelihood of conviction, and I guess they will have to assess whether or not that is the case now with the court judgment that came down. I must tell you, it's part of the journey we've all gone on in the last year to realize just how much limitation there is. It's striking to me that a political action can be taken to launch a police charge and the criminal proceedings, but you can't take a political action to say, you know what, on sober second thought, we've reconsidered, we're wrong and we're going to vacate these charges. It's good work from people like the Canadian Constitution Foundation, Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedom, Civil Liberties Association. They are doing the work in the way that our system allows. I truly wish I could do more, but I've had my wings clipped in the last year.
I do hope someone can stand up for the most powerless in your society. Who are those for? Okay, let me ask you this. This is substance what I want to talk about, and you're an actual expert on this since you run Alberta. So many natural resources here, so much energy here, remarkable. But it's also pretty cold and not always sunny half the year. So I was stunned to learn that you have solar farms here. Is that true? That can't be real.
Well, we do, and I represent a riding that's down in southern Alberta, and this is my favorite time of year to drive past when we've got snow-covered fields, because guess what? You've also got snow-covered solar panels that aren't generating a single megawatt of solar energy. We also, I don't know if you know this, Tucker, but I was very impacted by what happened in Texas a few years ago when their power grid failed, because we've mirrored the way that they've structured their market. They've got a large base of natural gas, but they've also added wind and solar. And then when they got into an electricity crunch and the grid failed, 346 people died. Because that's what happens when the power grid fails and people rely on electricity to live. So we ended up in the last 2 years now having 14 alerts on our grid, because that's how close we are to failure. And we had to take the extraordinary measure a week ago of putting out an emergency alert to Albertans, because if we were 40 megawatts away from having to do rolling brownouts, rolling blackouts, which would have meant 120,000 homes plunged into darkness for 30 minutes at a time, at 6 o'clock at night, when people are making dinner, when kids are doing homework. Imagine the impact of those who require machines to live, those who are on dialysis, or those who are in hospital. There's no possible way as a political leader that I'm going to allow the ideology against fossil fuels to impact what my job is, and that's to ensure that we've got safe, reliable, affordable power.
But I applaud you with such sincerity for taking a position on behalf of your constituents and their lives, not wanting to kill them.
May I say, because what happened that day, I know I don't like to put too many numbers out there, but to understand the scale of what we were dealing with, we were about 12,500 megawatts at our peak. So if 40 megawatts more had come on, that would have resulted in the blackouts I was just talking about. We've got 6,000 megawatts of installed wind and solar. Solar was 0. Wind was 7 megawatts. And I simply can't say to people, well, just wait till the sun comes up and the wind starts blowing at 9 o'clock in the morning, and good luck to you getting through the night. But that's, I guess, the divide that we're talking about, is I've been astonished to read some commentary after that happened was, see, your pause on renewables is wrong. You need to build more wind and solar. Like, how do you come to that conclusion, that your power grid fails because you don't have reliable power? My conclusion is you need to have more baseload power, more natural gas, but that's, I guess, the nature of the duality that we have.
It's just a little bit confusing if you step back, because power generation, power grids are highly technical, complex things designed over 100 years by engineers, and yet people who don't know anything about them have changed them. Would the same apply to, say, heart surgery? I've never gone to medical school, but I have very strong feelings about how you're doing your heart transplants. Let me impose my new heart transplant regs on you. You would say, that's insane. People will die.
I wish you would put Stephen Guilbeault in your crosshairs as you're doing.
Is he an engineer?
He's an environmental zealot. He happens to be our environment minister federally. And I guess if you put that question to him, he believes he has the expertise and knowledge to tell us in Alberta how to run our power grid. I don't know if you know much about Stephen Guilbeault. I don't know if I've ever heard you talk about him.
I'm wanting to learn less just by your description.
Well, one thing I find so offensive, you talk about the disrespect to our province. This is a guy who is an environmental advocate. He's best known for scaling the CN Tower in opposition of fossil fuels when he was working as an environmental advocate. But he also scaled the house of our premier.
So he's a rock climber,
well,
not an engineer.
Maybe he'd be better at that. But imagine that. Imagine somebody going and taking a criminal offense, going onto the roof of a premier, and then they make that person in charge of trying to dictate to us how to pull our resources out of ground, how to manage our natural resources, how to manage our electricity grid. That's what Justin Trudeau has done. So I'm trying to get him fired, and I would love your help on that.
It seems like for decades, the kind of rich kid lifestyle liberalism that now dominates everything was confined to kind of sociology departments at liberal arts colleges. Who made the decision to allow people like that to have control over medical schools, power grids, airlines? That seems like a bad idea.
Well, I wonder if you've got the same dynamic in the U.S. One of the things that I've noticed here as conservatives is that we have vacated all of the opinion-shaping institutions in society. So we vacated the media. The media is now almost, with the exception of some of the alternative media I mentioned, they are almost all of a particular mindset, a progressive mindset. The universities, and Dr. Peterson speaks of this very well, almost uniformly are they of an ideology that penalizes kids, quite frankly. If they want to write a paper about conservatism, they get marked down. You hear about that regularly. If you look at Hollywood, Hollywood's terrible when it comes to the messages and how they portray conservatives, how they portray capitalism. And I think as well, we have increasingly become urbanized. And so I suppose when you get disconnected from the land, disconnected from something real, disconnected from the dirty jobs, then do you understand that when you turn the lights on it, they only work because of everything that is happening out in the rural area. When you go and fill up your car, it's only happening because we've been able to have people who are developing our natural resources. I think that's one of the disconnects that we end up having.
I think that's such a smart analysis and totally true. But providing electricity to your population is not some kind of like boutique add-on you get if you pay extra taxes. That's like a baseline requirement of being a state. And if you can't provide electricity, you're a failed state, right?
I think you may be surprised to hear me praise Michael Moore, because I think he has done more to recalibrate what we need to be thinking about with electricity. Prior to his movie, Planet of the Humans, I think there was this ideology that all you had to do is put up wind and solar and batteries and you get free electricity. And I think people actually believed that that was true. They didn't talk about the intermittency, nor did they talk about the fact that wind and solar aren't truly carbon neutral. I mean, you can't make a wind turbine without steel. Lots of carbon that goes into that. Fiberglass as well, lots of carbon that goes into that. The cement at the base, there's lots of carbon that goes into that. And the truckloads that it takes to get it to site, all of that is gasoline and diesel. But that's the kind of the piece that he put together, is he realized that you can't have wind and solar without a heavy reliance on fossil fuels. And I think it blew up the paradigm. And so now we're beginning to have a more honest conversation about what that looks like. But I think that there is this fantasy thinking that because people don't know how things work, that they believe that these simplistic solutions that are offered by politicians are actually achievable. And it makes it harder for conservatives and politicians who do have to actually make things work to kind of bust through, especially when you've got the media stacked against you and trying to get the message out and try to make people realize that these things matter. We can transition over time to reduce emissions so that we have less impact on the environment, and that's all great. But affordability and reliability have got to be top of mind for anybody making decisions that impact people's lives.
So you literally have no solar-powered steel furnaces in Canada?
Not one.
Okay. Last question, because we're almost out of time, and I'm, again, so thankful that you're willing to do this. Where do you think this goes? You just said that your province, which is the energy-rich province of your country, was almost out of electricity just recently. So does this, if at the current trajectory, it'll be Bolivia in terms of its power grid, does that get better soon, or does it continue to get, what's your projection?
Well, fortunately, we do have people who have soldiered on and are going to bring on new baseload natural gas power in the new year. So that will stabilize on that front. Yeah. We also, I would like to take a page out of what the Americans are doing, really, because on the one hand, the federal leadership is talking along the same lines. That.
Oh, I've noticed.
But look what's happening. America has become the largest producer of oil and gas for export in that same period of time, while all of the politicians have said they're going in the opposite direction. So I think we should just double down and decide we're going to double our oil and gas production, because truly, like, where else does America want to get its oil from? Do you want to get it from Iran? Do you want to get it from Venezuela? Or do you want to get it from safe Canada? So I think that we can do a lot to make sure that the Americans know that we are here to provide energy security. We are a great friend, great ally, great neighbor, and we just need to get the political leadership to realize that we are a friend.
Then my 3-word piece of advice would be stop being embarrassed about who you are. You have nothing to be embarrassed about at all.
That's great advice.
Thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tucker.
Wait, can I say one last thing? You said CBC is in the room, the state media. I would love to do an interview. Hold on. I would love to do an interview with CBC. Meet me backstage. I dare you to put it on TV. Thanks.